This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. I wanted to do a video about what's occurring in Florida pre-Milton's arrival in Florida. Because as I was working on this video about some of the wording out there in regards to Category 6, which I mentioned in a previous video, that the mainstream media, USA Today, New York Magazine, New York Post, NBC, Forbes, they're using terminology like Category 6 and saying things like, we need to classify this hurricane, Hurricane Milton, as a Category 6 because it's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before. And as I was preparing this video, words started coming in about tornadoes actually hitting Florida before the hurricane arrives. Tornadoes hitting Florida before the hurricane arrives. And people out there literally think that us talking about weather modification and weather control is a conspiracy. These are not normal weather patterns. It is not normal to have tornadoes link up with hurricanes, unless of course, it was coming directly out of a movie, because then people would actually believe it, which brings me to this. Category 6, Day of Destruction. If you haven't heard, well, you've got to see the trailer for this B-level, let's just call it what it is, D-level TV series that was produced in 2004. Now, it is one of the worst films you will probably ever see a trailer for. The green screen itself is so bad you would think it was airing on CNN and it was actually footage of what's going on over in the supposed war over in the other country right now, which I won't get into. But it's called Category 6, Day of Destruction. And the plot of this film is that 3 tornadoes converge to wreak havoc on Chicago, disrupting the power grid and creating the worst superstorm in history, a Category 6 twister. So as I was preparing to do a video on this film and some of the programming in there, literally tornadoes started to appear, and the mainstream media and local affiliates are covering it, and people are posting imagery and videos from their phones on social media. This is what's going on in Florida, and still some people aren't suspicious.
Good day, everyone. We are coming on the air with breaking news about Hurricane Milton, the storm we've been talking about for days, a powerful Category 4 storm as of this moment. It has already started spawning a series of dangerous tornadoes touching down throughout south central Florida. The highest risk for those tornadoes runs through this afternoon. All of that, of course, ahead of the storm, ahead of the hurricane actually coming ashore, which is expected very late this evening or into tomorrow morning. Let's go to Dana Griffin in Naples, Florida. Dana, what do we know about these tornadoes? Have we had any reports yet of where they actually touched down?
We are getting alerts that there have been tornadoes that have touched down, as you mentioned, in south central Florida. We are in Naples, and because we are pretty close to that area, we got those alerts. So we haven't seen any particular funnel clouds or any sort of formations from this vantage point, but we are obviously taking this very seriously. And it is important for people that if you are in an area where you are getting that alert, you should be leaving the area or finding cover, because this is very serious, and this is ahead of Milton. We're already seeing the rain bands in certain parts of Naples. It's stopped for the moment, but this will likely be off and on throughout the day. Again, we are expected to get 5 to 8 feet of storm surge just because we are south of where that impact zone will hit in between Tampa and Sarasota. So it is obviously very concerning. Officials have already warned people, if you haven't got out, you need to leave now. I'll send it back to you, Kate.
Dana, thank you for that. And we're looking at some video on our screen. I'm trying to get a locator for what exactly we're looking at there, but clearly some folks are seeing what look like tornadoes.
So really, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not even joking. I wouldn't be surprised if they show us sharks in this tornado and they literally tell us that we're having a sharknado, and people out there actually think that this is a natural thing, that this isn't predictive programming of any type, that they would actually listen to whatever the government spews about sharknadoes and believe the government. They'd say, well, you know, because of the warmer water and the climate problem that we're having, the climate crisis, now we have sharks in tornadoes, and it's the new norm. And these people would regurgitate it and tell us that it's the new science. So we have the tornadoes. The other thing in that plot that I read to you is about the power grid. because there is potential here to be a complete nuking of the power grid in Florida. And part of what they're going to do with this sabotage that's going on with every single state is they need to sabotage the power grid. This is a great way for them to shut off the grid, to completely nuke the grid, and then have to bring about a new green power grid. And remember, all of this green power grid is not about these corporations making money. They print money. It's about being able to have control over your movements, because green energy is limited energy, which means you'll be allotted how much electricity you can use, and it'll all be under the all-seeing, watchful eye of our government, which you might as well call what it is, Lucifer. So now there's, of course, these stories about Floridians bracing for Milton's assault on the electric grid, which again, Category 6, day of destruction. 3 tornadoes converge to wreak havoc, disrupting the power grid and creating the worst superstorm in history, a Category 6 twister. We also have this narrative right now where they're telling us that this could become a Category 6 hurricane. Is that even possible? Do we need to rename and categorize hurricanes all over again because this is so strong that a Category 5 doesn't cover it? Here is the trailer for Category 6, and you'll hear all the talking points in 2004 that you hear now, all of the things that they've been conditioning people with for the last 20 years about why the climate's changing, all these weird mega storms, these GMO-like storms, all of a sudden are normal. And of course, they've been conditioning you into accepting it with movies like this, movies like Twisters. It's all been strategically done to get you on board with thinking that what's happening right now is some type of natural event when it couldn't be further from the truth. Here is the trailer. Try not to laugh while watching it because it's absolutely atrocious. It's one of the more horrific trailers I've ever seen in my life. But here's the trailer for Category 6, Day of Destruction.
Global warming is sure as hell changing the rules.
Global warming is an unproven theory, Andy.
Call it whatever you want. Something out there is changing our climate.
Sources at the National Weather Administration have told me there's a major storm making its way down from the Great Lakes.
I've never seen anything like this. You got this massive Arctic low pushing down over us, fueled by the polar jet stream. You got this Gulf storm pushing up from the south. That's fueled by the tropical jet stream.
Our plant took a direct hit.
Racing and turning
Let's get back in the truck.
Has a system spawning these kinds of tornadoes ever collided with a Category 5 hurricane?
If these two storms do converge, you gotta help those people.
Nobody ever wants to hear the sky is falling.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki times 50.
Yes, sir. The storm gods are serving up a feast today.
He brings up all these lines out of sequence and he's gonna blow the entire grid to Kingdom Come.
stock market crashes. National security is at risk.
About civilization, whether or not we'll have one in 20 years.
So obviously we can look at a lot of the predictive programming with films that have come out over the last 20 years that have all been about massive, unnormal, unnatural looking storms to condition you into thinking, well, this is going to happen in the future because scientists tell us that the earth is getting warmer. But the reality is that they're manipulating these storms. They're creating these storms. And it was also very interesting that you may have noticed they were showing you the St. Louis Arch in the trailer, which was designed by Aero Serene. And I've covered this before, even most recently with a horrible B-level film that came out recently called Continental Split, about how they used the St. Louis Arches to literally cause a continental split. And Aero Serene is the guy who supposedly designed the St. Louis Arches, and he worked for the CIA developing weapons. What kind of weapons? Weather weapons. So they even go as far as to show you Aero Serene's creation, the St. Louis Arch, in this film Category 6, because they've been using the St. Louis Arch as a means to develop and create a lot of these storms that have occurred out around St. Louis, out in Missouri. A lot of these tornadoes have been directly created from the St. Louis Arch. They brag about this. They openly even admit it. But then when we talk about it and we do videos on it, they kind of just try to laugh us off and make it sound like we're all crazy. But we could show them, government documents with Aero Serene's name on it, talking about the St. Louis Arch being created as a weapon for the United States government, for the CIA, with the ability to manipulate and control weather. So they show you that in the trailer, but again, it's a big conspiracy, right? And I mentioned all these movies that have come out: The Day After Tomorrow, Geostorm, Deep Impact, Into the Storm, all the Twister movies, which conveniently we just got Twisters that came out recently in 2024. They're doing this to condition you into thinking through propaganda, through films, through repetition, that all this stuff that's happening is happening because human beings are emitting too much carbon because of how they live, how they drive, factories, all these things that they're making up. When the reality is that they're creating these storms themselves. And they're creating these storms not just to wreak havoc, to accumulate resources, to take resources away. Because remember, once the government declares your land unlivable, which all they have to do is create a massive hurricane and then say, well, we can't build on this land anymore. It's unlivable. It's not safe. The government could seize your property, which again is what we're headed towards. There is no private property in global communism. That's what we've all been warning about, right? These Democrats are so clueless. They're actually supporting some of the things that they're out there talking about. And then I realize that Democrats are communists, which means that they won't own private property, that they won't own cars, that they won't own a home anymore. And one of the ways they've planned on taking those things away from us is via weaponized weather. Because once the government declares the land unlivable, they can come in and seize that land, and you never are allowed to go back on that land. Kind of like in Lahaina, how those people are never going to be living in Lahaina. Again, they've been relocated to FEMA camps, which is what those are designed to be. So all the predictive programming that's out there, whether people realize it or not, because most people say, well, nobody's ever seen Category 6, right? Doesn't matter if anybody's seen Category 6 and remembers it. There's a repetition and a pattern of these films that are programming you into accepting what's happening. They want you to accept what's happening with their explanation as of why it's happening. Because if the people realize that the government has the ability to manipulate the weather and that they're doing it deliberately to people, whether they like the people or don't, because at the end of the day, these communist globalists are the sickest, most sadistic people you could ever imagine. They do not support people who vote blue and vote Democrat. They'll be turning on you sooner than later as well. You're just standing as a wall, a defense wall for them between conservatives and the government. They're getting blocked and barricaded and distracted by all these Democrats because everyone's getting gaslit against each other. And the majority of these conservatives see how dumb Democrats are, and it baffles their mind. It baffles their mind how we're living in America, and the majority of the country, 50% of the country who votes Democrat, doesn't want capitalism anymore. They want to become socialist. And they don't even know what the socialist experiments are and communism is and what a failure it all turns out to be, deliberately, because it's sabotage. These people aren't trying to bring about socialism because they care about humanity. Don't forget, capitalism will remain for the Bill Gateses of the world. They're a capitalist at the very definition of what a capitalist is. They just don't want you to be a capitalist. So back to this story, back to the theme from this film, because one of the other things in there to notice was how they showed you the wind turbines. I've talked about the wind turbines. It's important to note that a lot of these things that we've accepted around us, 5G towers, wind turbines, these things emit frequencies, big time frequencies. Everybody thinks it's just a giant windmill sitting out in the land and they're not hooked up to anything. So, most people don't think, right? And even if they do think, they don't realize how much frequencies can be emitted out of these things. Same with the 5G towers, because remember, I always talk about this. If you can't see it with your own eyes, most people don't believe it's actually happening. It would take the 5G towers, literally, they'd have to see gas coming out of it, going down their throats for people to say, oh, okay, maybe we should get rid of these towers. Now, they could obviously get EMF readers. They could go over to these towers themselves and see that it's the equivalent of having your head in a microwave standing by them, or get a frequency reader and put it up to your phone and see how safe that is to have that up against your head or your crotch all day. And you'll start saying to yourself, wow, is it safe to sit inside of a microwave all day? And the answer is obviously no, but these people have to see it and have to have their hand held to realize it's going on. And that's what's scariest about what is going on, is that the people who are defending the government are so hell-bent against people like us, but they couldn't be more wrong. They couldn't be any dumber. They are useless eaters who are repeating government propaganda for the government, who's gone rogue against us and against them. So this Category 6 movie, I mean, this is what we call predictive programming, right? You can look at it and you could say, well, okay, we're talking Category 6, which doesn't exist. The media is bringing up Category 6, saying, should we call Milton a Category 6? Okay, we have a movie called Category 6, which is about tornadoes pretty much merging with a hurricane and creating a superstorm that wipes off the electrical grid that's blamed on the climate. Does that sound like what's happening? Because we just had tornadoes touch ground in Florida. Now, for those of you that don't know, tornadoes don't touch ground right off of the beach. I mean, let's be realistic here. I know there'll be people who go, well, I mean, it's possible for a tornado because I saw a Bill Nye episode. Right, these are the same people that tell us now it's natural for tornadoes to form in mountains, when we were pretty much told our entire lives and only seen our entire lives that tornadoes would show up in the middle of areas that were empty space where they could form, like out in the middle of a field somewhere in Iowa. Now, of course, they're forming, in the Appalachian Mountains and all these other places that they normally wouldn't be able to form because they're creating them. And all they have to do is come out and say, well, they're forming because the warmer oceans, and everybody believes it, right? Just like everybody believes that it's perfectly normal for the government to tell you to put something in your body that will not make you immune nor cure you from a disease that's no different than coughing from, having a common cough or a tickle in your throat. And these people believe them and defend them with that as well. So there's a lot of programming with this. There's obviously a lot of programming over the years that we've seen with these massive, not normal type storms. And the way it's shaping up right now, this is not going to be normal. Now, it's going to be hard to take what a lot of the media tells us about this storm because they could make this out to be bigger than it actually is just to continue to plant the seeds of climate change. But we do have to obviously look at a lot of the stuff because they're not going to be able to tell us that Florida's underwater when it's not underwater. We'll be able to see people's videos and things that they share on social media that end up going viral, listening to real actual people report on this stuff. Again, this is the stuff that they want to censor because whatever they want the narrative to be, they're going to try to make that narrative be that narrative. So if they create something, in other words, that's massive that ends up not being as massive as they want it to be, they'll still tell you that it's massive. So all we can do is pray for people's safety, hope it doesn't end up being some type of Category 6 type storm, and people remain safe. Hopefully God is looking over anybody who's in the line of fire. And again, I know a lot of people out there believe that this is God's wrath. You have every right to believe that if that's what you want to believe that it is. I believe that this is government weaponized weather. I've been warning about it for a long period of time. I'll go into more detail in upcoming videos about what I think is best for me going forward as far as where this is headed with red and blue states, which is where we all know that this is likely headed with weather being weaponized against conservatives and really infiltrating, and how we can infiltrate blue states and how we can navigate around this insanity that's going on. But that'll be in the future in deeper detail. I thank everybody for being here. Let me know what you think of the trailer for that film. And again, God bless everybody out there and all of your families as well.